Hi guys, my name is Marnie Magaro, and today I'm going to be talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. My speech comes from the Eagles Encyclopedia from Temple University, Wikipedia, and the NFL Record and Fact Book from 2011. A fun fact about the Eagles is actually shown up on screen here. This is the NRA Blue Eagle. The NRA, of course, came from FDR's New Deal program. The New Deal program was seen as a kind of new beginning and new hope for the country, and Bart Bell, who was the founder of the Eagles, wanted it to mean the same thing to them, and so that's why he chose it. The Eagles underwent a long history. They started off with a devastating loss of 56-0 and continued their pretty poor record. Then they kind of went through this stage of mediocrity, just kind of mild success, and finally in their recent era they obtained the ultimate success, the Super Bowl ring. And throughout their history, they've just kind of had this almost getting there type of vibe. And finally this year they did it. And so that brings me to their origins. This is the Frankford Yellow Jackets. They were the original NFL team for Philadelphia. They went bankrupt in 1931, however, in the middle of the season. And after over a year of looking, the NFL actually ended up finding these two guys, shown up on screen here, to take over for Philadelphia. This is Lud Ray and Bart Bell. They are the founders of the Philadelphia Eagles. And so they put together their team, and in their team they only included one original member of the Frankford Yellow Jackets. And so they had this whole new team. And this whole new team was pretty awful. In their first game against the New York Giants, they actually lost 56-0. And over the next decade, they never won more than 4 games in a row. So they just kind of had this really awful record. Then, in the next year, Lud Ray's half interest over the Eagles was sold to Art Tooney, and Art Tooney was the ex-owner of the Steelers. And so after this, the Eagles actually switched to the Steelers' hometown, and the Steelers switched to the Eagles' hometown. And the only thing that stayed the same was their nicknames. And then in 1943, which was kind of like the height of World War II, the manpower was so low that they just could not get the roster filled. And so during this time, they just actually joined together, the Eagles and the Steelers, and they formed a team known as the Steagles. They are shown up on screen here. They were only together for 1 season, but it was actually Philadelphia Eagles' first winning season. Then in 1944, they were able to go and they were able to win their first solo season. Their record was 5-4-1. They had their first solo winning season and drafted Steve Van Buren, and he is widely considered one of their best draft choices to date. And they continued with 2 more second-place finishes the following years and made it to the championship in 47 and 48, where they won their first NFL championship, and next year their second. Although everything was really looking up for the Eagles at this time, they were soon to face a lot of struggles, which leads us to 1960. And 1960 was actually one of the Eagles' most celebrated years, as they were able to name themselves responsible for Vince Lombardi, who is the coach of the Green Bay Packers' first ever and only loss in an NFC championship game. And so they were able to take that away from him and be his only loss in his record book. But their franchise was in turmoil inside of it. And in 1962, they had so many injuries and everything was just going terribly. They only managed 3 wins for that entire season. And this actually leads us to the famous Santa Claus incident. They had a fan in the stadium during their Christmas game where they were just doing awful. They were losing. There was a blizzard outside. The original Santa Claus they hired for the Christmas game called and canceled on them and said, "I'm not going out in this weather." And so they found this random fan in this kind of ratty Santa Claus outfit, and they brought him out on field, and he walked across the center line, and all of these Eagles fans were just so disrespected and so disheartened by how awful they've been doing that they just absolutely pelted this guy with snowballs. And it's just kind of this pinnacle moment in an Eagles fan's history where you just kind of look back on that moment. So after that, the franchise actually went bankrupt. And under their new owner, who was named Leonard Toews, they moved to the Veterans Stadium. This is a picture of the Veterans Stadium, this is a picture of the Veterans Stadium versus the Lincoln Stadium that they have today. And the Veterans Stadium was kind of a pinnacle, but it just did not last. It did not work well for them, and they did not enjoy playing in it. They continued to struggle with a mediocre record until Dick Vermeil started to turn it around, and they made it to the playoffs for the first time in over a decade. However, despite making it all the way to the Super Bowl, they still lost to the wild card that year, the Oakland Raiders, and it really just kind of disappointed a lot of people. In the years following, they continued their mild success, which came to a crashing halt in 1998 with a 3-13 record for the season. This was their worst record in franchise history. All of this leads to the recent era of the Eagles, which begins in 2000 with Andy Reid. The Eagles became re-energized under Reid, and they drafted Donovan McNabb. He is shown here. He is one of football's greats for sure. And they actually got rid of their aging players like Irving Fryer, and Reid led the way with McNabb as one of the football's greats. And in 2000, they reached the playoffs, which rejuvenated the fans as well. In 2001, they reached the playoffs again, and it just kind of started their domination of the NFC East, and they just continued winning 4 consecutive conference championships. But still, despite winning all these championships, they just could not clinch a Super Bowl. Their success continued, and it came to a crashing halt in 2012 with a 4-12 record, which led to Andy Reid getting fired. This was when Chip Kelly took over, and during Chip Kelly's first year, he was the first coach to make it to the NFC Championship in his first year, so that was definitely kind of a pinnacle moment. However, he did not uphold that record in the following years. It just kind of continued like mediocre success, and everyone was just really ready for a change, and that's when Doug Peterson comes into the picture in 2012. This is the current coach, Doug Peterson, and when he came in, he drafted Carson Wentz, number 11. He is our current quarterback, although he's hurt right now, and we don't know when he'll be back quite yet. Yeah, Wentz came in, and during his first season, did pretty good, but nothing to write home about, and then this past season went 13-3. The only problem being that he was injured, and so their backup quarterback, Nick Foles, actually took over, and Nick Foles was able to clinch the NFC Championship and continue it, and he was able to finally clinch the Super Bowl title. And so here is Nick Foles holding the trophy, Doug Peterson, and this is just kind of this pinnacle moment of success in the Eagles' history. Despite all of their injuries and having the backup quarterback and everything, they came out and they dominated the field, and they beat the Patriots in Super Bowl 52 and clinched that title. And so, shown throughout this speech, the Eagles have a long history of almost, so it's really easy to understand how important the Super Bowl win was to them. Throughout the years, the Philadelphia Eagles had a myriad of trials and tribulations in their pursuit of their first ever Super Bowl ring, which they were finally able to secure this year after injuries and losses prevented them. From their beginnings, from loss and unpopularity to mediocrity, and now a success story of brothers. So yeah, they just kind of really have dominated, and we hope to continue this domination. And in preparation for the Super Bowl, all of the poles in Philadelphia were actually greased with Crisco and gear oil in preparation for the win-happy fans. However, nothing can really stop the city of brotherly love, and so what I'll leave you with in the history of the Eagles is after their first ever Super Bowl history win, this image of triumph, where you can see that obviously a Crisco-covered pole did not stop this guy from celebrating his first ever Super Bowl win.